right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Governance Committee. We'll start with a roll call. Councillor Tabor?
Here.
Councillor Lombardi?
Here.
I'm Councillor Cook. I am here, and Assistant Mayor Kelly could not join us this morning. We have several members of the city staff here because we are covering some materials where we need their expertise. So we will invite them up as we get to those sections. The first thing we have on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the July 14th meeting. Did everyone have a chance to look at the minutes?
Yes. Move to accept. Second.
Any comments, changes, questions? No? Right. For those at home, those were available on the website. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the minutes are approved. We're going to start our discussion today with the draft encumbrance ordinance. And the first part of that discussion is around projecting signs. So I'm going to invite up Peter Britz, who's our Director of Planning and Sustainability, and Peter Stith, our Planning Manager, up to share their thoughts and answer questions as we get through this. And I'm going to share on my screen our encumbrance. This was also in the packet for those at home. License encumbrance permits for public use draft. This is our effort to combine all of our encumbrances into one ordinance. So you will see the statement of purpose hasn't changed, authority hasn't changed, but when you get to encumbrance permits, licenses, and use of public property, you'll see the first thing is projecting signs and awnings. And so that's why we've asked our planning leadership to be here to assist us this morning. And this is just a small portion of the ordinance. We just have a phrase here that says you have to refer to the zoning ordinance. So I have pulled up the zoning ordinance for everyone's review, and signs is in section 12. So we're going to go down to section 12. And please note that not everything in the signs section of the zoning ordinance is related to specifically encumbrances on public property. This also governs signs in general. Actually, it might be faster if I just search for signs. Maybe not.
If you search projecting sign, you type in projecting sign.
Yeah, projecting.
Okay. Oh, that won't let me do that. Never mind. Minute. Sorry. I don't usually do this in this.
Just go to
find
10.1.
Projecting.
221.4.
Okay, there's projecting elements.
There you go.
That was it.
That was
Okay.
a good.
That was a good one.
Okay, so this is the first piece. 10 point sign permits 10.1221 general sign regulations. So this is the challenge with the zoning code that is different than what we're used to dealing with the administrative code, is that it's embedded in several places. So and if you want to share any insights into the
Sure, I can
projected
start.
signs?
Peter can talk more about the details, but I think the way the process has worked is that when there's a sign over city property, the city council is the body that has to accept that, because it's just like city property or money. The council has to weigh in. So we've got a process in place. You see it on your council agendas almost every meeting. I think Peter can tell you how many, the number of signs projecting signs we've approved, but it's really ministerial in some ways. So it might make sense to think about other ways to deal with it. But if you want to talk about how you do it, how you prepare
Sure.
one for the council agenda.
Certainly, and I've been doing it since since I started, just for the planning director, preparing the memo. There's usually a memo that has the description of the sign, the dimensions, and we confirm that it meets the zoning ordinance, so it's no more than 12 square feet, and that the distance from the sidewalk to the bottom of the sign is at least 7 feet. And so there's a memo that goes with it, and then we prepare a map and then attach what the applicant has provided. And that goes to City Council. You see it on your agendas frequently. I just went back for the past 3 years in 2023, there were 24 projecting signs. 2024, there were 17. And to date, there have been 8 in 2025. So from staff's perspective, we have a pretty good, it's pretty easy for me to generate the memo and then send it to the city manager. And then as you see it on your agenda, it's pretty much rubber stamped. So it's, there's a way, I guess you're looking at a way of getting it off the council agenda and maybe having it just approved through the city manager, because it will still need a license. The way we have it in Viewpoint now, legal will draft, once it goes through the city council, legal will draft the license. It can be a delay for applicants because, we have to get it on the council agenda. A lot of times I have to reach out to them to provide that exhibit, especially showing the distance from the sidewalk to the bottom of the sign. And then also the full legal business name is required, and the applicant, sometimes I have to reach back out to get that information. And then it's meeting the deadline to get it on the council agenda. So it can't, because people are often in a hurry, we're opening, we need to get this sign. So there is a delay. Sometimes it can be a month or more.
Okay. That's good to know. Do you have questions? Does anyone have questions about that process?
So having not read this section of the zoning ordinance, we have limits on height and size.
Right, 12 square feet is the size of the sign, and then it just has to be a minimum of 7 feet from the sidewalk to the bottom of the sign. So often it might be higher, and usually the businesses downtown have existing brackets that they hang it on. So they're just kind of swapping out a new sign when a new business comes in.
I think it also has to be 1 foot in from the curb.
Right, from the travel right away.
So a truck wouldn't hit it or something.
This is fair. So has the council ever not approved a projecting sign?
Not that I can remember.
Okay.
And I think I have some thoughts on
Yeah.
that. So I think in the policies that were created over time, the ordinances, which as we have well discussed, they've evolved and popped up in all sorts of chapters. All of the ordinance say licenses shall be approved by city council in all the various sections. So presumably, the sign is one of those things. I think the distinction between the signs that Peter and Peter are discussing and the signs that the city clerk will be discussing, the A-frame signs, is that those signs are permanently affixed and they have an indefinite term. So whereas the ones that the clerk will be speaking about are temporary with an annual term. And so this kind of leads off to the little sentence in blue under the authority in the ordinance when I said a note about 90 days.
Yes.
So when we were speaking with staff, other than our planning staff, we were talking about, what is temporary, what is, and what staff might have leeway on, we talked about the range of perhaps 90 days versus something permanently affixed that can be removed, but with an indefinite term. And I think where we need to look is that, the council approves disposition and acceptance of rights in land. So property rights are a bundle of sticks, the law school thing that I still like to think about. And so if you hold it in fee, you get a bunch of sticks. If you have an easement, you have a few less sticks, but you still have, and a license is a stick, but not as many as an easement, which is a right that runs with the land that is assignable. Whereas a license is a right to use, but usually not an indefinite term. And that's kind of an interesting thing to think about for these signs. They're hard to chase and establish, but it might make sense to give them a term, or a simple renewal process just so that they're not an indefinite term.
Okay.
just a thought, but, and we've looked at the process, the sign permit process, and as we're looking at all these little permit processes, we're, seeing what works from the staff and what might be tweaked as we shine a light on all this. So, I think one of the ways in which we could split, kind of split the baby, as they say, is to do what is said in the, I think it's the, I forget which policy it is on, like the A-frame signs, Cal, that says in an omnibus matter, it comes forward to the city council. So perhaps consideration would be given to have administratively approved projecting signs, but it comes forward as informational, so there is some, oversight by the city council and approval by the city council. Or we shorten the term of the sign and make it, a shorter term. Something to contemplate,
Could we just do it as a consent agenda item?
certainly. And I thought that's where the committee was headed, wanting to have oversight, wanting to still issue the licenses or with the city manager's authority to act, but to have all these now just on the consent agenda, not just projecting signs, but some of the other licenses and some of the other, approvals that for these types of things.
I mean, if they were listed as projecting signs, meeting administrative approval or something
Right.
like that.
And the question would become then, do you want the full documentation to come forward, or simply, staff has reviewed and approved the criteria of the sign, and so anything that would come for that approval has already been vetted. Might simplify the packet and the process, but it's up, it's whatever you think the council might want.
Yeah, I mean, I think location and, I guess I also wonder, about an image of a sign, what it might be, but,
I'm concerned about delays. I can understand the concern around delays. And it's, if we hear one complaint, it's always that it's going through city processes, take
Right.
forever for everything, for permits, and people lump it all together. So
Sure.
they think
Right.
the inspections is the same thing as what planning's doing with their sign. And so anything we can do to streamline that process, but still make sure that it's consistent with our rules. I kind of like the idea of an omnibus, an annual omnibus, that if everything meets administrative,
yeah,
but with a, as I said, with always an appeal process. So if you're denied, you have the ability to appeal to the council versus, or if a neighbor isn't happy. But I can't imagine that currently neighbors don't get notice, correct, when there's for a sign. So it's not like we're sending out notices right now and people are coming in and complaining about signs. So.
And they're permitted by right if they meet the dimension of what's in the zoning ordinance. So I think the appeal would perhaps be by someone who were denied, but then that is through the land use board. So it's a decision of an administrator, denied an application for a sign, and then you go through that appeal process. So I think generally for some of our other types of encumbrances, yes, we're talking about an appeal. But when something's by right, it's by right, and the appeal is already in the zoning ordinance.
So I have a crazy question around this. And this is where planning could really help me understand. Why are signs in the zoning ordinance and not just administrative? That's,
Because they're the use of land, it's another instance where you're using the land to a certain way, and zoning is all about the look and character of an area. So the signs, if you think of it with no sign regulations, then you could have sort
oh
of
my
a,
gosh.
you could have
Yes,
like
yes.
a fun house kind of feel, and there's signs everywhere because the businesses all want to make big signs. There's often a tension of how big their sign can be because they want as many people to see it as possible, and we're often saying, well, you only can have 12 square feet. or whatever the square footage is in the sign district. So I think that's why that's in there, but this one is complicated by the fact that it's over city property. So
Right.
not only are they having a sign of a certain size, they're putting it in the public space that you guys are charged with overseeing. But I think,
Airspace.
yeah, airspace,
It's
exactly.
like all
Airspace.
zoning, it's the private interest versus the public interest.
Yeah, I was just curious as why zoning and not just in the administrative ordinance, but I guess it is a land
I
use.
think so. I mean,
Can be a land use.
I don't know when it got put in there, but that's what I would think. Yeah, kind of a land
It's
use.
the public's
Typical.
land.
It's often an area of zoning that communities have problems with.
Yes. And there's
Challenging.
obviously cruising through chapter 10, there's lots of requirements in different
Yeah.
sign districts and what's permitted and what's not
Historic
permitted.
district.
Yes, so
Oh, yeah,
it's
HC
very,
has its own rules, yeah.
there are a lot more, there's a lot more to it than what we're discussing here today.
Right, it's very complicated. There's this section 10 section, and then there's the whole section 12 on signs as well. So I know when I was going through this, I was like, okay, how many places is this? And the reason I say that is that we're trying very hard to get everything in one place, so it's easier for people applying for permits to understand where they need to go. And I was trying to figure out how do we refer them to all these places in the zoning code without just saying just in the zoning code, because it's hard to find things if you don't know the code. So,
Very.
yeah, so,
Even if you know the code.
Full disclosure.
Yes,
very challenging. So,
That's what AI is for.
so how do we make it easier in our encumbrance ordinance, besides just saying in the city zoning ordinance?
Right.
For people to find where they need to find projecting signs and awnings, rules for projecting signs and awnings.
I think the permits are where, in the permit application itself, I know for our goal for the special event permits that we're discussing right now is to be able to link, or have hovering and explanation and, Q&As and guidance. So I am not familiar what's populated when you pull up a projecting sign application. But are the criteria set forward in the actual application process itself?
In Viewpoint,
Yes.
well, you have to check a box.
Uh-huh.
It says, I think it checks if it requires city council approval. There are different sign types. It's in a sign
Yes,
permit.
yes, there's all sorts
different
of
sign
stuff.
types. But if you check the box for city council approval, it populates the steps that alert the specific staff in the process for checking off if it needs license, and then it's supposed to trigger other requirements like providing the full business name and business owner, but often somehow they can submit those without completing those steps. But it's all.
So I think what it's been kind of interesting talking to the various staff as we work through these things. And one of the things is, what's outward facing and what's the simple information per permit per application, and where does everything live and how do we link things? And so one possibility is to put more of the dimensional requirements in this ordinance and reference the zoning generally. The only thing is that this lives in a different chapter than chapter 10. So if we amend chapter 10, which by the way, there's a prohibition against banners, we just have to make sure our sections talk to each other and that what we're referencing gets updated if one section does, because that's what happens when it lives a lot of different places.
Yes, so that's what I was looking at here is the projecting sign, with the rules on projecting signs, require city council approval and license in accordance with chapter 8 of the municipal code. So we would have to modify this if we change the procedure.
Yes, absolutely. And there'll be a laundry list of red lines of different ordinance sections as we decide on our direction, what will what will accompany, you know, a draft of the new ordinance would be the red lines of all the old sections that we're attempting to edit out. So that would be something we would need to edit, you know, because it might not be chapter 8 and we might describe the process that we are now discussing, so it matches. So we just have to make sure one section talks to the other.
Could this stay the same and then the approval for the sign be somehow memorialized that the city manager shall have the authority to approve signs over city property in the instance that they meet the zoning ordinance or something like that?
Yeah, we could do that and then bring them back in an omnibus. Like we could make sure that we had that, you know, council oversight for the license.
So we would just have to specify what city council approval looks like.
Yes.
City council approval of these licenses will occur in a
Omnibus,
Omnibus.
annual omnibus.
yes.
Notwithstanding the fact that those are gonna be up in existing signs, right? So that's the thing about the omnibus with the parking, traffic, and safety, is that these are temporary parking measures that have been temporarily enacted. And after a year, if PTS thinks it's something to bring forward, then they come forward in one large zoning amendment. And,
I worry about that with projecting signs just because of the volume and the history. Every year there's a lot to try to reapprove them.
right.
I mean, you always can revoke the license if they become a problem, but to
Right.
try and look at all of them every year or
Would be
every
too
2 years
much.
would be, I think, probably too much.
How long is the license usually?
It's indefinite.
It's indefinite.
Yeah,
but
so that could stay that way.
Yeah,
So if there becomes a problem or the city wants to do something different with the sign or expand the street under the sign, then the sign might have to go away. I could think of that as an instance where you might have to change it, but that's why the license is so important, because a zoning approval, it's indefinite and there's no revocable part. The
Yeah.
license gives you
Gives
that
us the
revocable
power,
part, so you can
yes.
always take it away if you need to, or change it or whatever you want.
what about internally illuminated? I know there's references to that in the zoning ordinance, and especially in
That is-
the HTC.
It has to be, HDC has to be projected from the outside. Internal illuminated has its own standards.
Yeah.
It depends on the district and how you're gonna do it, I guess. There's certain ways that aren't allowed.
Rather than an annual omnibus, would it be a simple procedure if staff has done, you know, all the things that you're now getting? Would it be every 3 months, however much the council wants to review these signs? Do you want to review them before they're issued, or do you want to review them after they've already gone up? And that's two different paths.
Well, seems more logical to review before.
Right, I mean, we've got a range of options. We can have it city manager ministerial, as you say, because somebody conforms to the zoning ordinance, they have it by right. We could have it omnibus, but omnibus poses the risk to the business owner that for some reason the council might reverse the decision. Or we could have a consent agenda where we get the pretty pictures and the dimensions, but it's, you know, it's a quick vote.
Yeah.
And a minimal delay just to play devil's advocate, you know, we could have a sign that meets the dimensional requirements in all the zoning ordinances, but is just really distasteful.
Well, then we're talking about regulating content of signs, which is the whole First Amendment
that-
issue. So you're not really approving the design of the sign as the council. You're just approving it being
Signs.
erected over the airspace.
Right.
You're right, there's First Amendment.
And that is a real issue. There's a lot of litigation over signs. It's very, very highly litigated issue. So what the council's approving is over the airspace. You know, they're approving dimensional, height, you know,
Lighting.
number of signs on the premises, all that other stuff pursuant to the zoning ordinance. And you're approving the fact that it is permitted over the airspace and a license that gives them the right to use that space with revocable, you know, with issues of revocation if necessary, provisions of revocation, I should say.
So I might be the only one who doesn't feel that the council needs to see these. You know, to me, the omnibus was the easy solution, but I don't know that the council needs to see them unless there's a problem and there's an appeal. So if somebody's unhappy with the decision, the administrative decision, then it can come to the council. Or if the staff's uncomfortable with making a decision on something, I think it's reasonable for it to come to the council. But given that we don't ever reject these, I mean, I just don't see the
we
need for
ever
the
rejected
council
any?
to go through
I don't
this.
know of any.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
I
know
haven't
of any,
seen it
but
happen.
I guess my question, something like the musical, for instance, the marquee, that was a variance, you know, that's something
Which
that's, the music hall
Music hall.
marquee. You know, when someone wants a sign that is outside of the parameters of
Yeah.
the zoning ordinance, the mechanism isn't appeal to the council, it's a variance often,
That would be a
correct?
variance,
Yeah.
right? But if a sign were approved by staff and the city manager approved it with the council's authority, and the neighbor didn't like it, even though it met the zoning, they could still you might be able to put in a way to appeal that, right? It would be a different
If it
appeal. It would be appeal of you're using city property in a way I don't like, and I want to object to that. Would there be a way to
That
do
could
that?
be brought to the council as informational, but I still would need to know the circumstances about
Why?
why.
Right.
Because what you're appealing is, I mean, what you're approving is actually quite narrow.
Right. The only thing I could see happening is potentially someone who lives on a second floor of a building and the light from the sign
Mhm.
shines
Yep, that's true.
into their
That-
window
right.
or the wrong, you know.
That's true.
That's the only, I like to think that people are
Have
generally
a voice
very,
or have a place.
yes,
Mhm.
they're generally very good about these things unless it really does impact them negatively.
What is the regulation about illumination of the sign? Is that, I mean,
So most of these are downtown. You know, signs in the HCC are only by external illumination. And then there's hours of illumination. It shall not be illuminated between 11 and 6 a.m. Unless, you know, the business is open. But then they can only be not for more than 1 hour after the activity ceases. So that's specific hours of illumination. And there are a whole host of other things for external illumination.
does that encompass dark sky
That
as
would be a
as
different.
part of it?
Yeah.
There's a whole table of types of illumination,
Yeah.
sign illumination in here. So they can only be illuminated as set forth in this table. So the sign district and then the types of sign, freestanding sign, whether they are allowed to be illumination, not permitted or permitted.
Yeah,
And so these are all things that people can go get a variance for, but this is what's allowed by right in the ordinance. And a lot of not permitted in some of these districts and then more permitted as you go.
yeah. What are all these districts there? Sign districts?
The districts
How are
are,
they defined?
where's that?
It's in the front of the sign.
You can all see how complicated this
You
is.
know,
Yeah.
and it gets very, very complicated. I think
One more.
given even this flipping through sections on illumination
Interesting.
kind of
Both
leads
32.
me to think
Oh, there it is.
that
Okay,
it may be best still on the consent agenda, the projecting signs. One of the ways, though, that maybe simplify the process might be to not give as much, I mean, just the picture and the address.
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
I've
a very
brought
simple And then we'll, you don't have to actually read the terms of the license, but something very, very simple and list in the consent agenda. That way someone could pull it off the consent agenda
If
if
necessary.
there was an issue, which is
Yeah.
true of all of the things we've been discussing generally.
So someone can come to public comment and
Say,
say,
hey, you
Yeah,
know,
they'd
this
have a
light's
chance to
shining
speak.
in my.
Yeah,
Without having to file an appeal or something like that.
right, and then we
Right.
could pull it off the agenda and then talk about it.
And so the question would be, how much information, are you getting more information than you need about these signs? I'm thinking you're getting quite a bit.
Yeah,
You know,
we are.
and so what do you think would be appropriate on a consent agenda for a projecting sign? How much I know what you're getting now. Are you happy with that? Do you think we could simplify that? Or have a form that we generate, outward facing, to the applicant that then comes to you? Like a form they can populate, a one-page document, have the same for everyone, and that just gets put on the agenda. We're trying to help the public too.
Yeah. I know you always put a map in of where it is.
You like to know the location?
And that's
And sometimes that's useful, sometimes it isn't. As I say, I think an image of the sign and the building might be more useful. I think we're all pretty,
You can all look up the address.
we can all look up the address. And I think most of the council is pretty familiar with
With the
the
streets.
buildings in town,
So you don't need that larger map.
Yeah.
so here's my other question around this is that while the council has to approve these licenses, if they meet all the standards of the zoning code, what are the repercussions if the council doesn't approve a sign?
It would be airspace related, I would assume, right?
Yeah.
I would think that what you're approving is the right to use the
Use the
airspace.
space.
And you can't approve content, I want it in pink, not yellow. I don't like the lettering.
Yeah,
That
I'm
is
glad you
not,
clarified all that.
that is not
Out of
your
our
purview.
Yeah.
Are we inviting, though, unfortunate, like some potential scrutiny that's unwarranted by bringing these things to the council? I mean,
Well, we've had for many years. I don't know if there's ever been a history. In my memory, I haven't heard of one.
Yeah, I think you're worried about a problem that doesn't exist.
well, I'm worried
Or
about
hasn't
the
existed.
problem that doesn't exist is, I think there is a problem of delay for applicants. And we're not doing anything to solve it if we're not changing anything. I mean, if it's still coming to the council agenda, it doesn't do anything to streamline this for applicants.
Well, like,
So all we're doing is making the council's agenda easier. And we're making it easier for the council and maybe easier for the staff, but we're not making it easier for applicants, I don't think. So,
is there value in having it as part of the public document? That would be the only question. Yeah, because if it's strict administrative approval, it doesn't have to be public. So,
That's true.
so that's my real question for the committee is what direction makes the most sense? Like, do we feel that the council absolutely does need to see these because it's in the public domain and it provides that appeal process naturally? Do we think the council maybe doesn't need to see them and they can be administrative, but then we set up an appeals process so that they can be appealed if necessary? Or how do we,
Well, maybe
or
only
do we leave
if
it the way it
there's-
is?
Maybe only if there's some sort of something that's concerning for the administrative approval, something that would require some sort of variance, or I don't know. I can't even imagine what it would be.
The only thing I can think of that would be concerning is that you know of a future project that wasn't considered and you want to protect that public space from having a sign over it because you're planning on using it in a future project that maybe staff didn't know about or that you guys considered
Yeah, that would be.
separately.
Yeah, that's a good example.
That's
Yeah.
what I can think about,
And
because it's really the use of that
reasonable-
space.
But
That's
Public Works
reasonable
also
regulation,
uses stuff,
right?
right?
Mm.
Public
Don't-
Works doesn't see
No.
the sign permit applications, no.
This is all done with
Yeah.
the planning, so this is why we have different, different permit systems through different departments issuing different.
Just planning and legal.
Yeah,
Would it make for more efficiency in the planning department if you didn't have to put something together for the council?
Yes.
Certainly, it's time. I mean, I can do it pretty quickly, but if I'm going back and forth with the applicant, that takes time. And preparing the memo takes time, but,
Yeah,
the
perhaps
information-
the
the
memo to the
information's there.
city
The information's
manager,
there. It's
the
easy to-
big map of the city, the sign itself, that, one page would be,
Yeah.
I think would be great if we could, if you would like to see something, I think you're getting a lot of information. And I think it could be condensed to a form.
I
That's
guess
just
I'm beginning to agree more with Kate on this. That maybe just, if it's, by right,
Just
we
let
need
it
to
go.
see it. And, I mean, if we find that the planning department all of a sudden is misbehaving, something, then we can ask for it. I don't see that as a problem, though. I hope not.
No, I don't think it has been.
hasn't been yet, so.
Some people might disagree.
Yeah,
I think that it's been illuminating to me to learn that this is, you meet the criteria, you have it by right. So there really is not a lot of latitude for the
Yeah,
council.
it's not content regulation of the sign, it's regulation of it's approval of the permission to put it in the airspace above city property. That's all you're doing.
Right, so, are we doing it simply because of the dead hand of tradition?
maybe. I did see there, I mean, there's a difference between advertising and informing, right? Or something, what is that?
I think that'll come up with the flag discussion too.
Yeah,
It's directional, signs are treated very differently and informational signs are different than other
right,
types of
and there's
signs.
something about only one, like advertising sign.
Yes. It was a flag or a A-frame sign,
Yeah.
and so you could have one or the other, and
Yeah.
that's when the city clerk chats with us, we can talk about those as well.
And that's the next discussion, and that's treated a little differently,
Mhm.
so,
Mhm.
yeah. So, I want to give our legal department some general direction about where we should go with this, so that we can draft this appropriately, this section appropriately.
I guess what I could say is we're also probably gonna spend a lot of time next meeting for the encumbrances from DPW, which I guess we'll have a robust discussion. Same concept though, right? Well, what do you need to see? What is where is that point where it goes from administrative or ministerial to council approval? So we have 3 suggestions right now. Maybe we just keep those open and then have the next discussion with our DPW folks and come to some agreement because it may just be for all the types of encumbrances, that we see X and we don't see Y as we have these conversations. Because quite frankly, I'm learning a lot every time that I speak to Peter or I speak to Kelly. All I did was write 3 lines about this in the ordinance itself, but what we're learning is we're talking about processes and we're talking about existing versus improving processes, and it's actually a great exercise. It's also what the council approves, but also, making tweaks moving forward. So maybe what we do is we hear what the clerk has to say about the other types of signs that she administers. And then we can revisit all of this when we have the discussion for the encumbrances and licenses for construction at the next meeting, if that's helpful.
I think that is a good suggestion. It is helpful. For everyone at home, that's the next section of our agenda, sidewalk obstructions. And if I can, I'll bring City Clerk Barnaby up. Because this is an interesting, slightly different process.
Yes.
Because they're, I think, considered temporary. And it's interesting because you see some of this in the zoning code here at 10 when on projecting poles and flags. So it can be a little bit confusing, but then there's also chapter 9. It describes a public way obstructions, placement and registration and the process for that. And then the process, which is sidewalk obstruction license application that you go through the city clerk's office. So I guess, does anyone have questions about this process? Because it's very different.
It is different.
So do people, when they want a flag or a sidewalk, an A-frame sign, they just come to the clerk's office?
Correct. I will say there is a little caveat to that. Flags used to be licensed back in 2009, and then in 2010 there was 3 of them. At the time, the city manager at that point decided that without having a whole stream of flags go everywhere within the city, he wanted to just allow them on a specific street with specific guidelines for what they look like, what the size of them would be. So that's what they did, and they used Deer Street as an example. Okay? It turned out that it didn't work after some time, that it just wasn't going to be something that was going to go anywhere. So flags in general were just not allowed per the city manager. But now you see there are flags everywhere. So I guess what we need to determine is, do we want to allow some of them based on by right, if it's just saying open, or do we want to allow all of them to be licensed as a whole? That's another issue that we can look at. I think we need to keep it a simplified process, and that is what is happening with OpenGov, which is great. It's an easy tracking. It allows for communication between the applicant and the office, as well as with legal enforcement, which is Jason, and as well as Jane in terms of the certificates of insurance. And the applicants applying online, and they can pay for their permit online. Currently, we have 23 licenses that have been issued for A-frames. And what we just did was we've created with the information office upstairs in the city manager's office this Did You Know, which is going out within the next week or so. And it's to tell people that you actually do need to have a license for these types of obstructions. And it has a handy QR code which will take them directly to the application. So these are gonna be in more of an 8.5 by 11 sheet. Yes, you may see. And what will happen is Jason will have them with him so that when he goes around to some of these businesses, he's able to hand these out to the businesses so that they can get into the system, file their application, and we can get these licensed and taken care of. Let's see.
They want to see that.
And my understanding is most of this is governed, I just shared online, the projecting sign policy from
Policy, yeah.
2009
Yep,
is kind of what is governing.
Right, and it says
The
one or the
license.
other. And
Yes.
my recollection of that policy is you can either have an A-frame sign or
Yes.
a
Or a
flag. But my interpretation of the policy isn't that wasn't an open flag. I believe that it was sort of advertising purposes, you know, for the business itself. I think and Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
But, you know, Smith's Coffee Shop or whatever, or A-frame sign, or the flag, is it historically, are they, hey, we're open for business, and the A-frame sign and or the flag, or is it the business name? Do you recall?
As I recall, it was more of like an open for business kind
So
of
they're
thing.
both sort of open signs then?
Yes.
Okay.
I think there's also though another question here, if a business wants to hang a US flag, you know, can we regulate that type of,
I think just for the purposes of
Airspace.
the intrusion over the
Sidewalk.
public land, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Same thing would apply.
Okay.
But it is interesting, you know, you said you had 23 licenses for A-frame signs.
That's correct.
Do you have licenses for flags?
We do not.
So what we discovered during our conversations is that we're seeing flags, but we're not seeing licenses for flags. So this is something important for the committee to think about, right? Are we concerned about that? If so, then we have some enforcement issues to deal with. And I think this what's the handout that's going on? What's the name of it? I love the name, I've forgotten it. Like, did you know? Is
Did
that
you
right?
know?
Yeah.
Is
Some of
the-
it could be purely educational, you know, purely
Yes.
that they are not aware that you need permission for that, you know. So I think it's
Tuck it in the
great
back or
that,
underneath on the right.
you know, the process is rather simple for
Yes.
the application. And I think it's terrific that we're getting ahead of it and we're reaching out to the public. So I'll be very curious to see what a response we get when that goes out, if there's a big increase in requests. But it is a question, you know, that obviously the city has dealt with differently over the course of, you know, the last several years, last 15, 20 years. And, you know, what's the policy for that? You know, what should be the policy for permitting those types of A-frame signs? And do we still want to limit it to one, you know, per business? Is it, if it's purely directional or just a straight open sign, is that different than Smith's Coffee Shop, you know? It's an interesting, you know, without regulating content, I think, you know, it's similar to the zoning ordinance. We only allow so many, you know, we're only allowing these obstructions into our rights of way, one per business or one A-frame sign for business. We just had a situation where someone's on a corner and they had 3 A-frame signs, one here, one on the corner, and one down. We said, nope, you can only have one, and they complied, you know. So, as again, we shine a light on something that we seem is working and simple, and then we realize through our conversations that we're looking at it again from a different lens, given it's 2025, and what are people really using the flags for? What are they using the A-frame signs for?
Well, we're in a golden age for A-frame signs. They're very clever. People are competing to think up something clever every
Yeah.
day to put on Congress Street. And, you know, we have the size regulated. We're telling them not to obstruct traffic, so, you know, I don't.
And that's
Doesn't
checked
seem to me we'd wanna
regularly.
limit
We
it.
get calls when things are not being managed. We hear about the A-frame signs,
Yes.
yeah, if there's a problem, the city hears about them. The flags, less so, you know.
it's interesting, I would think the flags would be sometimes more challenging depending upon where they're hung. Because they can be in somebody's way when you're walking down a sidewalk, if they're not hung at a high enough height. So I know there are a few of those in town that are a little challenging to walk around.
Yeah, Series Bakery.
Yeah. You know, so,
Don't
so,
get them in trouble now.
yeah, so this is like always one of those questions. And what about temporary flags? I know that there was a question that came up earlier this year about temporary flags for like art round town. If all the galleries hung a flag for art round town, so you could identify where they were, or if for, you know, kind of event specific, that's, you know, a recurring event.
And I think that leads sort of to somewhat to the banner question that you had asked, that the city attorney is working with staff and researching as well. You know, again, our zoning ordinance is probably not up to speed on special event signage either. So this, once we kind of view the permitting for a special event, then we also look at that section of the zoning ordinance too about signage, because obviously the banner, if that comes forward, that will obviously impact that criteria. And yeah, that's a real debate, you know, the whole signage. We try to be pretty vigilant about the little stick-in, you know, the little metal stick-in signs for special events. We allow them directional, you know, and the day of for those types of things. But there is that balancing act of, you know, how much signage is allowed for particular events, and then it can get a lot to manage. And you know, I don't know if the banner program was sort of a way to kind of bring awareness generally to certain things. And I don't know if people are unaware of special events. I think people are concerned that people are unaware, but I think we have a pretty informed visitors. I think we have pretty informed residents about events. But it's always that balance of, you know, what you do for one, you have to do for everyone. And when you open that door to one, then you also have to open that door for everyone. And so the question becomes then, if we allow the stick-in signs and we allow 8 flags and we let, you know, for each special event in the city, when we have 100 events, you know, I don't have that figure, that's not accurate, but we certainly have probably close to 100. I don't know. It was certainly over the 400th. I bet we had over 100 events that year. Even 50 events, you know, that's 4 a month, you know. So it's a big question. And so again, thinking about the flag issue, I think the A-frames are simpler. You know, I think that's been working pretty well, but the question of flags, certainly the height is something we need to be conscious of. And I know people on the side streets, you know, with new businesses, they have a tendency to want to put as much out as they can to draw attention to their new business or whatever. And we send Jason out, he politely discusses it with everyone. But, you know, what are we seeing? We're seeing signs. They don't have licenses. So from a policy perspective, what are we, you know, where are we headed on the whole issue of the flag permits?
Well, ours say at least 7 feet of clearance to get.
Yes.
So the height's spoken to. And then it can't be more
I think we
than 12
just
square feet.
kept it, I think I referenced the 1 per business without resolving that in you know, put a little note on that.
I was thinking of Kate's example of art around town.
Yeah.
And it would be convenient to have something unique for each of those spots. And it's a very popular,
That could be a request to council.
Yeah.
That could be a letter from Art Around Town, you know, to council to say we're going to have, you know, a yellow open flag for each place that, you know, and then council permits it and they're allowed to do it. And it may change from year to year, so I don't know how much we want to memorialize that. But that way we aren't opening the door completely for absolutely every
Yeah,
event, it's a one by one, it's not a hard request. It goes to council, yes, for this one event, you can do, this particular thing.
isn't it the chamber that organizes that? Yeah, so the chamber could,
The chamber
Make
could
a
ask,
request.
sure, they just asked for street light, and they're getting their permit today.
yeah,
So I kind of like this policy of either or. Because it gives businesses the choice of an A-frame or a flag.
Mm.
I personally maybe don't have problems with the flags. I think they actually make downtown maybe a little more colorful and happy. It's not all brick and it's, every once in a while there's a pretty sign or a pretty flag flying. But that provides a way to limit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't do both. You can do either or.
I'm sensitive to any business, small business, needing to promote. If they don't promote themselves, they won't be there the next year. So I would be more on the A-frame and flag.
I guess I would add, we have a whole, you're just talking about on city property, right, because it's encumbrance,
Yes,
right? Because there's a whole
yes.
section on temporary signs and special event signs for like real estate signs or special events or businesses that they can put on their property that we do regulate in the zoning ordinance, but this is just outside of that on city property.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
Just clarifying that.
Thank you.
still, no harm, no foul if they
yeah.
plaster something on their own.
Yeah, as long as they meet our zoning.
Yes. Yeah. I think we're specifically talking about where they are over a public space,
Yeah.
right? Or in a public space, yeah.
What about, you see these people holding signs for business, you see it more out on toward the malls and stuff like that. But
Right, when going
Is
out
it-
of business sales or some
Yeah, yeah.
placards of some
and
kind,
they're they're hawking, kind of. Do we regulate that?
I don't think we do. I don't think zoning does, because that would be on public property if you're on
Yeah.
the sidewalks or the streets, but you're,
Right, I don't know their sidewalks, I don't even think they're on sidewalks.
I just
think
wonder
they're-
about it,
yeah,
and
Yeah.
that could start happening in town too.
It could,
I think there are challenges though around public forum space, in being in the public space and First Amendment rules.
Mhm.
What you can and can't do in the public.
and what's defined as the public forum.
Yeah, exactly. So there are real challenges there. While the city has public forum space
You
specifically.
could regulate for distraction, like police power, public health, safety, welfare, if that person was doing those crazy dances you see sometimes for signed people,
Yeah.
it was getting so good, there was a crowd assembled, then, maybe you could say you're disrupting traffic and you need to cut the dancing, but, But-
Get onto social media.
it's right, and then it's a
It's
sensation,
right.
and then, they have a million likes and on and on.
Sorry.
But,
Right, I mean, free speech, so we start having
Exactly.
challenges around free
Right.
speech rights, yeah.
so, I'm hearing one of each, but I'm not hearing indefinite amount. I'm hearing that is still resonating with the committee, that, some number should move forward with this ordinance.
I kind of like the idea of flag or A-frame myself.
I'm throwing it out there. What about, and I don't know how hard this is for administrative purposes, the first 6 months of a new business, you can have both. After that, you can pick one. I mean, if we're worried about the newcomers, I don't know, but that's
You have a,
hard to enforce and track and,
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
we're trying to say, what's the right thing for this public space? This, it's city space. So, the seniority of the business is kind of outside of that.
I'm struggling a little with telling people that they can't have an A-frame if they fly an American flag.
I don't know that we would necessarily do that for the American flag.
Yeah.
I think we're advertising open. I think those are like open,
Yeah,
So you
I
can
think there has to
understand,
be a distinction
right? Yeah.
between the two.
yeah, that's what I'm struggling with. If you're flying the US flag or the state of New Hampshire flag or the city of Portsmouth flag, that's one
That's a
thing.
different, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is for advertising on public space.
right.
Like, this is advertising your business, in essence, that's what you're allowing.
But other than that, I don't want a lot of, like, I don't want everyone,
Right.
every single business to have necessarily a flag and an A-frame. I just worry about obstruction at some point.
Mhm.
Although I don't think that's gonna happen. I mean, I don't think we're gonna end up with a lot of obstructions. And, you know, and maybe we can go that direction, and then if we have problems, we can
And you
come
can
back
always
and
look at it
say
again.
either
Absolutely.
or
Mhm.
instead of and.
Yeah. I think it'll find its own level, because it's something the staff of the store has to do too every day.
And if they get complaints, you know, or oh, this is in my way from from the public, or they're gonna, usually people have been pretty reasonable about whenever we've had enforcement issues.
Does that give you some guidance?
So you thinking either or still?
Me?
Two? I'm hearing two either ors, one,
Both.
both.
See, and I'm an either or person.
Either or except for, you know, government flags.
And the question is whether we shine a light on that and call that out in our ordinance, or whether we deal with that on a case by case.
I would deal with it on a case.
Although we should have some regulations around size
Yeah.
of flags.
I think
We
we,
need to be careful.
That's in here.
you do in the zoning, right?
Yeah.
And
Size
the
of flags,
12 square feet.
but are they gonna be having to follow the zoning on these? Or these are administered to the clerk? Do you look at the zoning? I don't,
But you have the same dimensional restrictions, Kelly, that is in the zoning ordinance, right? The 12?
do you have?
The flagpole and
Yeah, 'cause
size.
we don't have it.
I
in
would
there.
have to actually
Except
look
for
at that
protecting flags.
actual
Where's the flags?
license to see what it
What the
says.
dimensional
Yeah.
restrictions are, I think.
You have a license right there.
Oh, this, oh, interesting.
12 square feet in area, that's what our policy,
What
our
that-
existing policy
12
says.
square feet.
Yep, and then 7 feet of clearance.
Yes,
Okay.
that's,
Each lot may have 3 flags,
Here.
freestanding or attached, in the zoning ordinance.
The zoning says 3.
Freestanding or attached to a building that are up to 12 square feet in area per flag. In sign
Wow.
district 1, up to 24 square feet, sign district 2 and 3, up to 660. So the flags are regulated, but it doesn't say they can be over city property.
Right, that's on private property.
This is on private.
Oh, okay.
I would think we could pull that 12 square feet requirement,
Yeah, I put it in
city
the
property
draft.
too.
Yeah, I put the 12 in the draft that you have,
3 by 4
12.
or 2 by 6. That's
12
pretty-
square feet, and then the 7 feet above the right of way or the public space.
It seems reasonable.
And then I think, Kelly, not to get off the subject of flags, which is far more interesting than we all thought. You also do the chairs, the tables, and the benches, correct?
Well, we don't do tables or chairs, and they don't get charged, so.
Right. But you still
We would
have a
license them.
permit for them.
Yes,
though.
yes, yes, yes.
So,
So are there any suggested changes to that procedure for the chairs and the tables and the planters? One thing I think I did add to the planters, which someone brought up from governance a couple of meetings ago, that if you have a planter with plants in it, you have to maintain your plants. I thought that was something
Yeah.
that had come up,
Yeah.
in our prior conversations. So it's really that, the flags and, do you know, which hopefully will help us get more compliant folks with the flags.
Right.
And as an aside, one of the things that also came up is sort of the enforcement piece, and I just wanted to mention again that our intern is putting together a change to our enforcement ordinance, which would make it a little bit easier and not simply be reliant on one staff person, where little tickets could be, you know, warnings, or I know parking gives warnings, you know, or a ticket for infractions and things like that. That is in the works, not yet ready for prime time, but right now we just have our staff go out and talk to our downtown business owners, and so far we've been fortunate that we've been able to work our differences out you know, hopefully to everybody's liking in the end.
I don't know where other committee members stand on this, but we are no longer charging for tables and chairs because we consider them a public good, because they're provided for everyone. I think that anything that's provided for as a public good should not incur a fee, but things that are intentionally for advertising purposes for your business would. In that same vein, planters to me are a public good.
Yes.
You know, it's to beautify the area, so, you know, tables, chairs that anybody can sit in, planters is a public good, maybe for hanging up a US flag, that is not something that we're gonna charge you a fee to hang a flag, but whenever it's advertising or an open sign, that you're drawing direct attention and using public property for your own good.
Just to clarify, tables and chairs are no charge if you allow the public to use them,
Correct.
Yes, exactly,
as
exactly,
opposed to strictly private use.
right. As soon as they're enclosed,
We decided that at the fee committee, I think.
Yes.
yes. So I feel
And
the
right
same about planters too,
Yeah.
it's not,
Sure.
Do we have a lot of active permits for planters, Kelly?
No, in fact, we looked at them as, we were told to look at them as the public good
Mm-hmm.
for beautification of the city and not to require any licensing at all.
Okay, so even though we have that in our fee and in our ordinance, we are not presently regulating planters.
No, but we can if that's the decision.
do we need to, I mean, we don't want them. I think it's good to have a permit if they're sitting on the sidewalk. It's one thing if they're hanging on your windows, I don't know how much of an obstruction
Window
that is.
boxes.
Yeah,
That'd be
But that's also in
private.
the right of way.
right. So I guess there are questions here about making sure no one puts up a planter box that's so big that you can't pass on the sidewalk.
Free passage.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
and you know, Jason would make sure when he does go out, if he does see a planter of any kind, that there's at least 3-foot clearance on the sidewalk, that it doesn't obstruct with somebody's ability to be able to go down the sidewalk.
What, just the lawyer hat.
Yeah.
One thing that I am asking is if we should at least have a permit and have a certificate of insurance to indemnify the city in the event somebody trips over a planter, at least know where they are, and maybe we don't charge for it, but at least to have, you know, a record of the locations of them and their dimensions and, you know, that sort of thing. Not to discourage them, you know, but to simply keep a record, you know, so that and also that they're indemnifying us for putting that in our right of way.
Yeah.
Good.
Guess we need that.
Do you have to think about that, given that this last week there was a walk around the city just for people in wheelchairs to determine what's an obstruction, and, you know, it's very important.
Right, so we
Yeah.
need to just make sure we're,
Yeah, it's a big
Providing
part of the outdoor
access.
dining. We do the outdoor dining permits, we often are making sure that they have passage for the wheelchairs to get through on the public sidewalk. And that's often a challenge for businesses, but they seem to be able to make it work, hopefully. I don't know how the walk around went.
But you know, it makes you think about, you know,
Yeah.
somebody puts out a planter that's beautiful, but
Right.
they didn't think about, maybe it's just a little too wide.
Right, or it's, yeah, it impedes, you know, someone, so I think, if the committee, agrees that we should probably still issue the permits for them,
Sure.
but, you know, I think listed in the fee, the budget, I think there is still a charge listed for planters, correct?
I think there
I
might
think
be.
there is.
And so that's I mean, even the application, and we haven't updated the application yet since we changed the table of chair. So that's there, and it still says that it's $75 per planter too. So, we'll, you know,
Let's clean that up.
yeah, we're gonna have to ultimately
Right.
update this form.
Yeah,
And we
the
have a
whole
lot
thing.
of these forms that are all gonna have to be updated as
Mhm.
we're working on encumbrance, but,
Well, we'll just go right online.
well, and this one is available online. This is the one that you can pull up to download, not the online system. So I think the online system is already probably updated to reflect this. It's just, but if somebody pulled that up, so,
We'll update that.
yeah.
So when somebody has a planter as part of their parklet for outdoor dining,
That's part of the outdoor
That's the
dining.
part of
outdoor
outdoor
dining.
Yep,
dining.
and the design standards that were,
so they don't,
Adopted
they don't
as-
have to
yep.
do two.
no,
No, that should go away when they're done with their outdoor dining though, so only for the
Yes.
season. And it has to be planted, is what it says in there.
so, if the fee, I don't think you waived the planner fee, so the next, on the fee committee's meeting, you might wanna recommend
We should
that
refer
waiver.
those, yeah.
That would help, I think, clarify, since, especially since we didn't really issue permits for them this year. It's, you know, maybe we just need to let
Something went
people know we're gonna
Please try
issue
again.
permits, that they're not gonna have to,
Sorry about that.
they're not paying for them. So,
And
Does the fee committee meet?
February.
So we want to start getting them licensed, but don't charge them until,
well,
or?
luckily, the city council amended their policy and can actually amend fees at a council meeting.
Sure.
So we wouldn't need to wait for the fee committee to approve and the budget to be approved. And so maybe when this comes forward, maybe that request for that waiver
Okay.
comes forward at the same time and then gets memorialized, you know, with the conversation with the fee committee.
can we put some language in here about, the public good and
Sure,
so that
yes.
people are aware when they're reading this, that if it, you know, if it serves the public good, there's not a fee associated with it. Yeah, so just so it's clear.
Perfect, will do.
Enhances the public realm.
There you go, that's the public realm, that's perfect language, Counselor Tabor.
Just wrote it down.
Do you need anything else on this section for now from us?
No, I think the next session with DPW folks and the broader conversation of the encumbrances and license for construction purposes and parking spaces will be another whole meeting, you know, and I can, based on our conversations, tweak what we have so far, but know that some of these things are still open questions as we work through and learn more.
And that'll help us with coming up with our final policy on projecting signs.
Great.
Thank you to
Sure, of
our
course.
guests today
Yeah.
for coming and answering our questions.
We learned a lot.
Anytime, yeah.
Yeah.
No, happy to do.
Don't say that, you,
Yeah,
Sorry.
it is
You'll
really
be on
helpful.
speed dial, you know.
It's okay, it's okay.
It's very helpful because, you know, we're not the experts by any means in this, and so.
Yeah, well, it sounds like there's a lot of things sprinkled throughout our ordinance. It's great that you're cleaning this up, so,
yeah, we're trying to kind of
yeah, make it easier to
make it
understand.
easier.
Yeah.
One place for encumbrances so everybody can find it.
Yep.
Even if it's in some other place, we can at least refer them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and that, you know, will flow through to the taxonomy and the, online when people are looking for where to find permits.
I was gonna highlight this too. This is in chapter 9, for everyone. There's the public way obstructions, placement
Newspaper.
and registration. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
newspaper boxes. So,
Pages and pages of newspaper.
so we probably need to
Delete
update this,
that.
delete that section on newspaper. And we could probably move this, which I think is really important for everybody
Right.
here to see. Because this is in miscellaneous public welfare.
Right.
There's the
And-
sections on public way, and so that probably can all move to this new encumbrance section, what's
Yes.
left of it.
The goal, yes, the goal is the references, get rid of the planning references, chapter 11, move whatever remains of 9, either in 8 or 6. I don't think we haven't flipped a coin and decided where everything is going to, which is why I haven't put section, chapter numbers in the ordinance, but absolutely, the newspaper rack, lengthy ordinance pages, I think, can be deleted.
Right, that'll come out, and then there's also this council projecting sign policy
Would be
is probably gonna,
rescinded,
yeah, rescinded and incorporated just the language. So everybody knows, so that we won't need a separate policy, because it'll be an ordinance.
So the next 2 sections are the license encumbrance, and then after, and also I put in organizationally businesses in the right of way, so the vendor and all of that. I think it's probably best to do the encumbrance first and then deal with the other section that talks about the vendor parking space and the existing but not used policy for vendor carts in particular locations, which is another one of our existing policies.
Yes.
So we could do that next, after the construction comes.
Okay, sounds great. So it doesn't look like we have anyone here for public comment. No announcements except our next meeting date. I want to double check with everyone on the meeting date and time. I have us skipping the next August date.
So the 28th,
Yeah, it would have been the 25th of
I mean
August.
25th, yeah.
I have us skipping the 25th. I think one meeting in August is enough torture for everyone, given
I
all the
agree.
family schedules. So
I wouldn't be here anyways.
that's kind of what I thought. And so that puts us into September. And the challenge with September is the first week is Labor Day, the second week is council. Do we want to try to meet the same day as council in September, or do we want to make that off a week, September 15th and the 29th?
Yeah, you could still get 2 in
Yes,
September, 15 and 29.
yeah, we can do 15 and 29, and then that just puts us into October. I might have a challenge in October because I've got a kids' fall break. That's the week that we would normally meet, so we might have to move the one in October, but if everyone thinks the 15th and the 29th would work for September, let's do that. Okay, that way we're not meeting on council days.
So, right now, we have a council on
The 8th,
8th.
the 8th and the 22nd.
Yeah, there's a problem with the 22nd, and that's the beginning of Rosh Hashanah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So we might have to move the council.
Well, the council might have to move,
Yeah, that's,
because it's an evening thing.
yeah. So we'll flag that too. I'll flag that too for the city
I just-
manager's office.
Just sending a text to city manager.
Okay.
I just saw that when I was looking. I said, uh-oh.
Uh-oh, yeah, that's a problem. So we'll just plan on the 15th of September and the 29th for governance. And that shouldn't conflict then. We should be okay.
No, yeah.
Sticking with
That's it.
11.
All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we are adjourned.